Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving, purpose-minded women who've written nonfiction books and want to amplify their message beyond the book. I'm a college professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to use their books to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and purpose. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening into the podcast. I just appreciate you for listening in. I say it all the time, and I'll say it over and over again because, you could be doing anything else with your precious time, but you're taking the time to listen to the podcast. So I'm so glad you're here. And today I'm talking with Jenn T. Grace. Now I'm going to add the T in there because it seems to be a part of you, but you can say more about that later, Jenn. Okay, so Jenn T. Grace. Let me tell you a little bit about Jenn. Jenn is an award-winning author, a nationally recognized speaker, and a savvy publishing strategist. She's the founder of Publish Your Purpose, an acclaimed hybrid publishing company that gives first-time authors the secrets to getting their books written, finding an eager audience, and marketing their place in the publishing world. Jenn leads ambitious authors through every aspect of writing, editing, and publishing, so their book strategically aligns with their business objectives, and she helps authors articulate their purpose and to fulfill their mission. Jenn has published the books of almost 200, that's right, 200 business owners, entrepreneurs, speakers, and so many more. So more diverse stories can exist in the world so her authors can make a positive impact and achieve the recognition and success they deserve. She is the author, now get this, herself. She is the author of 7 books, including Publish Your Purpose, which is a step-by-step guide to write, publish, and grow your big idea. I love that. Jenn has been featured in Forbes, the Huffington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and CNBC. And to my delight, Jenn lives in Connecticut with her family, and she enjoys being outside with her son, kayaking, hiking, skiing, and admiring the birds and nature around her. Welcome, Jenn T. Grace.
Oh, thank you, Robin. I'm so excited that we're here, and I love that our first conversation was a shared bond over Connecticut.
Yes, that I'm from Connecticut, and my heart and all my loved ones are in Connecticut, and you're right there with them.
Yeah, right in the same neck of the woods too, no less.
Yes,
it's really cool.
I love that. Okay, so I read your official bio introduction. Why don't you tell us in your own words about you, who you are, and then about what you do?
Yeah. So, what's funny is that I love the emphasis on the T. So I do want to just kind of address that because it always feels really formal to have a middle initial. And I am not a formal person. If anyone reads any of the books I've written or just sees me in the wild, formality is not really how I operate. But when I was putting together my personal brand back in probably 08, 09, somewhere a while back, there were a lot of Jenn Graces. And so I was like, well, how am I going to differentiate myself? I'm like, I know, I'm going to use a middle initial. So that is how that came to be. In my, my personal brand website's jenntgrace.com. So it's important that it be there, but it does always feel weird when I hear it in a bio because it's like, oh, that's not really who I'm not formal like that. But
I completely understand that because like you, I am not formal. However, I use Robin L. Owens because, again, there were a million Robin Owens. So I use Robin L. Owens. And if that weren't formal enough, I use Robin L. Owens, PhD. So I get it. I definitely get it.
Yeah, it's all about the personal brand. And we've had a number of conversations about just branding and, the aesthetic and the colors and having that subtlety and matching. And so it's all those little things that really just kind of, I think, add up, even very much directly related to author brands too, right? Like we want all these little pieces really do have an influence over how people see us and how we're presented in the cohesion among platforms and all the things that we're up to. So
yes. So
sidebar.
Yeah, I interrupted you. So you were about to tell us about you and about your work.
Yeah. So as you said, I own a Publisher Purpose, and we started back in informally in 2015, more formally in 2016. I wrote my first book back in 2012, published that one in 2013, and then I had a whole series of year after year after year of putting books out. And now my cadence seems to be about every 3 years. So I wrote one in 2017, one in 2020, and I have one coming out in October of 2023. So it seems to be, which was very much unplanned. I just happened to notice the pattern the other day. So I feel like I always have a book in the works. And as you and I will be kind of diving into, I have an 8th book idea that we're going to kind of brainstorm, which I'm excited about. So yeah, I definitely, I feel like I'm a writer at heart, which I don't often say. But when I was little, I definitely very much dreamed of being kind of like a Dear Abby. That was really, which is one of my visions, was just being an advice columnist. And that's how I started my first book, is that I took the blog post of a blog that I had been writing. It was very much in a Dear Abby type of style around the LGBTQ community, where I had friends that were in medical professions who were asking me all of these very random questions about LGBTQ patient care. And I'm like, just because I'm part of that community does not mean I know the answer to your question. But I was like, well, this is an opportunity, right? Like if this person has that question, there's probably a lot of other nurse practitioners with that same question. So let me just educate myself to educate others. And that's kind of how all of my career really started to unravel, was through that blog. And then it kind of expanded into more marketing and communications, which expanded into consulting. And then I wrote the books, and then I was doing keynote speaking. And then everyone I knew was like, hey, I know that you're out there writing these books. And like, how did you hire an editor? Or how did you know how to find the right cover? And then I started teaching people. And then from teaching people, I had people being like, yeah, you're teaching me, but can you just do it instead? So it's very, it seems like that's like there's a lot of other variables, of course, but a very kind of like a very straight line in some senses of how I started versus where I am now. And what I love about what I do, and I feel like similar to kind of the authors that you get to talk to on this podcast, is that I get to be the engine behind the scenes that helps really elevate and uplift really awesome people in this world. And it doesn't have to be the same topic over and over again. Like, there's such a diversity of topics and incredible humans who are really up to good work. And they just need the right strategy and direction to go to make a bigger impact. And so that is where I've landed, and I could not be happier in the position I'm in.
And I love that it all started with your young heart wanting to write and have an advice columnist. So now, when did you realize there was a connection to the work that you were doing by the time you were doing the blog to that interest when you were a small child? When and how did you make that connection?
I think it just kind of happened by accident one day. Because if I actually look at all of the things I wanted to be as a child, they are all very disconnected. Like, there is no rhyme and reason whatsoever. So for a while, it was very much kind of like Dear Abby. Then I wanted to be a technical writer, then like doing manuals and things like that. Then I wanted to be a meteorologist, then I realized how much math was involved in that. I'm like, I can't do that because that is not my strength. Then it was environmental scientist. And so there's all of these kind of very creative on one side and very scientific on the other. And, I kind of swayed in between those worlds, and I ended up getting degrees in communications and marketing because I'm like, I don't actually know what I want to do. But I want to say it was probably when I was writing my memoir, which was published in 2020. It's called House on Fire. And I think it was probably around then when I realized that connection of like, oh, wow, I'm actually really living what my really, really young self wanted to be. And what's really cool now, though, is that Publisher Purpose is a certified B Corp. And so for anyone unfamiliar with that, it's a global certification that means that your business meets environmentally friendly business practices, socially responsible business practices. And it's really rigorous. It is very intense to obtain, but it's amazing when you do. But it weaves in all of that kind of environmental side of things that I was really interested in as a young person too. So it's kind of cool to have like this, really kind of like the best of both worlds. So yeah, I would say probably just in the last couple of years, I kind of like put it all together.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the story is amazing, and how all those different pieces of who you are as you are evolving in this work all come together now. That's fantastic. All right. So before we get to your current books, let's go back to House on Fire. Now that you mentioned that one, the title, tell us about the title and a little bit about the premise of your story in the book.
Oh, that I always struggle to answer this question because my story is incredibly complicated. And what's funny is that just earlier today, I was at getting my hair done, and I said something that made my stylist like turn her head because I had said something that wasn't congruent with how she knew me. And then it was like right as she's finishing my hair, and I have short hair, so it takes like, 30 minutes to do my hair. And I was like, oh girl, we do not have time for this. I was like, but are you an ebook reader or an audiobook reader? Because I'll just send you my book. And she was so excited. So it's funny that was the question this morning. So House on Fire is actually a title of a Sia song. And so Sia is one of those musicians that I just can plug into and write like I am on fire. Like it's just so like it just kind of like profoundly comes out of me. And so when I've been writing probably my last 3 books, I've been listening to her music just kind of in the background. And I was flying one day and I hadn't figured out how to title the book. And then all of a sudden House on Fire I'm like, oh my God, that is the song. That is the title of the book. And it is both a literal house fire that I had when I was 18. So I lost everything I owned at age 18. I had like, a couple of things, but pretty much everything, including pets. And, it was just an awful, awful situation. But then it's also more of a figurative house on fire. So just growing up in a very dysfunctional household and then basically repeating all of my past in adulthood. And so, I'm publicly on a podcast, so saying this is interesting, but like basically marrying my mother, raising a child that was exactly like my sister. So I truly, in that definition of like a very psychological sense, like repeated the exact same patterns. And so much of it is that, but then the light part of it is just kind of the breaking free of those patterns, like recognizing, oh, wow, like you really did repeat everything that was familiar and comfortable to you, and it does not serve you anymore. And so how do you kind of break free of that? And so it kind of ends, it goes from age 6 to 36. That's kind of the period of time that it covers. And it ends kind of at the place where my mom passes. And so I have that freedom of being able to actually fully express myself in her absence and not needing to worry about, if I write this and publish this, how is it going to make her feel or, other family members feel, which I think a lot of people who are writing memoirs, it's a huge concern. I hear it all the time when I talk to people of, I can't write this because it's going to hurt so-and-so, impact this, it might damage this relationship, et cetera. So the through line from start to finish is adoption. It's adoption and dysfunction. Those are the two kind of big ones. But yeah, and it was a really hard memoir to write. I'm not going to lie.
I would imagine, but it sounds like it's very powerful. And we were just kind of playfully talking about how we have the connection of Connecticut. And now we have another one about the same age. I think I was 18, like you were 18, when the house I grew up in and lived in was destroyed by fire.
Really?
In Connecticut.
Oh, wow. That's profound. I don't talk to many people who've had that same experience.
Yeah, me either. And so, which is why I mentioned it. I'm like,
jeez.
Yeah. So, and even the title, I'm finishing up a book that we talked about earlier on how to have more meaning and purpose. And one of the core stories in the beginning of the book is how that life-changing moment of the house fire, that impact on it. And so there was sometimes I was like, oh, should I use the fire as a part of the title and all this kind of stuff? I decided against it, but it's interesting. But anyway, I digress.
Well, you know what? I will just say, because I feel like we probably share this commonality then, is that when you have a life experience like a house fire, it is, in my opinion, the equivalent of a death, and then multiply that by 100, because you literally lose every single thing that is meaningful and valuable to you, whether it's your pets, your possessions, your home, your car, literally everything. And so what gift I take out of that experience is that, and I feel like you could ask anybody, that I am literally anything. You could be in my home and be like, oh my God, that's such a cute, insert anything here. But like, oh, you want it, take it. Like, I have no real connection to valuable things, like to like just material things, not valuable, material things. They don't matter to me, because what matters are your relationships, the people around you, your memories. Like I lot like photos, like you don't have, like if you have a house fire, you lose all of your, like the photos, especially like mine happened in 1999. pre-digital cameras and having like everything stored in the cloud and things like that. So, I think I've actually taken it as a big blessing in my life, because I like the things that other people worry and stress about, I could truly care less about.
Yes, yes. Same with me. I'm not attached to material things, and I attribute that directly to the fire. I don't keep things for a long time. I don't have a lot of quote clutter because I just don't hold on to things because it's a different experience of losing them and then finding them. Okay, and I'll just say one more about that. I said I was going to move on, but somehow I am not moving on. The house that I grew up in, and it's featured prominently in the book, and it's a house that my parents owned, and it was a 3-family house, and so my cousins lived on the second and third floors, and it was like one big extended family, but we were just one family together, and lots of memory and joy and fun, all kind of balled up into that one place. So to lose that, to grow up with that, and to lose that was significant.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so now now let me turn my attention back to podcast host and ask you the next question. All right, so now which book do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about Publish Your Purpose? Which book do you want to focus on for this?
I would love to, because I haven't actually, you're the first conversation I'm having about the new one.
Okay, all right. So let's go with the Publish Your Purpose, a step-by-step guide to write, publish, and grow your big idea. And I'm especially drawn to your big idea piece. Mm-hmm. All right, so tell us about the book. Anything you want to tell us about the book?
Well, here's what I will say is that what I have found, so part of PYP's mission, so we go by Publish Your Purpose, we go by PYP for short. Okay. And so the title of the book is both Publish Your Purpose, but also the title of the company is Publish Your Purpose. And when I was thinking about the title, I hemmed and hawed and went back and forth, and I'm like, I should just call it Publish Your Purpose, because that's exactly what the whole book is about. It's really thinking through from a mindset side, so it's 3 parts. It's mindset, writing, and then publishing. And what I have found is if we look at books that are out there about writing a book or even publishing a book, a lot of times they're not in the same book. You can go out and try to find, there's a lot of books on how to write a book. There's a lot of books on publishing a book, but they're a little bit, there's some gaps, I guess, is what I'll say. And so for me, what I also know is that the mindset piece is a huge part of this process, that if we're not in the right frame of mind and we don't have the right resources and skills that can be developed because we don't even know that we need them, then we're already kind of at a disadvantage. And so it really kind of covers what's your purpose of the book? What impact are you intending to have? Who are you writing for? A lot of the fundamental things that really make or break the success of a book. And so the first part is very much just really laying that beautiful foundation of, all right, here's all the things you need to know. Now let's take a breath. You have your vision, you have your clarity. We're feeling good about ourselves. Now let's talk about the writing process. And the writing process is not how to use proper punctuation and grammar. It is none of that. It is very much how to trick ourselves into doing the things we need to do. Because I think that's where, there's tons of books, a lot of really amazing books on, how to use commas properly and, things like that. But the reality is that most people just need a formula to follow. So it actually provides a formula for how do I get from this idea in my head to actually being able to sit down and put something on paper. And so there's a lot of, it is very scientific and formulaic, which I feel like we don't often think about when we think about books and writing. We think about creativity and we're going to lock ourselves away in a cabin for 6 months, which is unrealistic. And we're going to take a sabbatical from work and all of these things. And the reality is that we can fit it in the cracks of our day. If that's all we can do, there are always ways that we can do it if we're committed to doing it. And then it ends on the kind of the publishing side. So what do you need to know about traditional publishing, self-publishing, hybrid publishing, to really just kind of lay out the path and say, all right, if this is important to you, you might want to look at this. If this is important to you, why don't you look at that? And so it's meant to be a one-stop shop to really have the vision, have the plan, and then actually know where to go to do the rest of it. And whether they come to us, that's great. But if not, it's written in a very accessible way. So that way it can really impact the majority, the amount of people that I feel like are really just kind of lost in the publishing space. Because I don't know about you, and you talk to authors all the time, but I feel like the publishing part of the process is very overwhelming to people. And so I want to kind of break it down into simplified terms.
Yes, I think all of it is overwhelming. And so to have a
Mhm.
step-by-step guide like that is especially helpful. And I'm particularly drawn to this purpose aspect of it, in addition to having this all-in-one kind of guide. So what would you say in your working with authors? I'm sure you hear lots of stories about the whole process. I'm going to ask you two sides of the coin. The first one is, what would you say? Well, no, let's not even go with authors. Let's go with you. Even someone who it sounds like writing just flows through you. It sounds like
Mhm.
I've not had this experience. I've published a book, but the writing never really, I can't say it would flow through me. But anyway, so what would you say? Let's talk about you and not the authors. What
Okay.
was your greatest challenge as an author?
Well, even if it flows, it doesn't mean it's pleasant. So I guess I'll just say that. So,
Ah,
what's actually really interesting of how I wrote this one is that I am just a very organized, methodical, pragmatic person on a whole. And so I just track my time in general because I want to know where I'm spending my time. Like my greatest resource for everybody, it's our time. And so I just track my time generally because I want to know. And this is all part of the book in terms of like, strategies, right? So I have a spreadsheet and it's part of the book. We can go download the spreadsheet for free where it's okay, here is I'm flying. What I know to be true is that when I am flying, I am on fire. I can crank out thousands of words on a flight, but if I'm trying to do it at my desk, it's not happening because at your desk, you're used to talking to people. There's a million, everyone wants your attention for something. There's distractions. But when I'm flying, I don't have to worry about that because I don't have to connect to Wi-Fi if I don't feel like it. No one's expecting anything from me. So I actually tracked my time throughout the entirety of the book. I don't have a total number at the moment yet of how many hours I invested in the writing. I could look it up. I just haven't looked it up. And what I did is as I was writing the book, I was writing almost in real time what was happening for me. So, you'll be reading, chapter 9 and I'll be saying like as I was writing this chapter, chapters 3 through 6 weren't even written yet. So that way to kind of see that we don't have to write in a linear way. And I think that is the biggest challenge that most authors have, myself included, is that we've been taught that you write your introduction, you write the body, and you write the conclusion. But if you write where you're feeling inspired in any given day, like, especially if you're writing a memoir, for example, where you're telling snippets of stories, or if you're writing something that's how to, you might have just gotten off a call with a client and just been diving into step 5 of an 8-step process. Why try to go write step 1 if you were just in the thick of step 5 when you can just go write it down? And so I followed my own kind of advice in that. But then what happened is that I had most of it written, but I had these giant gaps of chapters because I just didn't want to write them. Like I just was not inspired to write them. And so I had to like force myself to sit down and do it. And I started writing it in July of 2020. So my memoir came out in September of 2020. I started writing it in July of 2020. And I picked it up for a couple of months. I put it down. I picked it up for a couple of months again in 2021. I put it down, picked it up again in 2022 and put it down. So, it was really a lot of a battle, honestly, like a battle within myself of, I know I need to do this. I know that deep down I want to do this, but I just cannot get in the flow of writing these damn chapters. And there was only a couple of them, but they were so frustrating. And I think that's how like we all kind of, because it wasn't a writer's block. It was just a complete and utter indignance about even the writing process. It was like even worse than writer's block.
I'm laughing because I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on the flip side of it, what was your greatest joy as an author?
Greatest joy. As far as the writing goes, I think when you're in flow, I think there's something really magical when you find that flow because it doesn't always happen. And when it does happen, it's exciting because you're like, you can almost like feel yourself in real time. You're like, oh, I think I'm in flow. And then like, you don't want to jinx yourself and you just got to keep kind of like moving forward. So when it really just starts to kind of like come out and feel cohesive, but right now it's in proofreading. So it'll be out. I know, this is our conversation is out in March of 2023. And so the book will be available. It'll be pre-order on our website, but it'll be available for everybody in October. And it's in proofreading right now. And I actually am like rereading things and I'm like, I wrote that. Like, I'm actually surprising myself. Like occasionally I'm like, wow, that was actually written good. Cause I feel like we all have like that doubt and those gremlins that creep up of like, who do you think you are to write this book? And even though I've written 6 others, I like somehow I've not conquered those limiting beliefs of like, you're not worthy enough to write something. And so I get really excited when I see it's like a sentence or two every 20 pages where I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize it, like, because I was in flow and like it just kind of like came out. And then when you're going back critically looking through during that proofread process, you're like, oh wow, like I'm actually better than I thought I was. So I think that part kind of like, it's like little snippets of joy here and there.
Yeah, which helps us keep going, right? So
It does.
joy matters. Joy definitely matters in that case. All right, your book is connected to your business, but what would the book Publish Your Purpose? What would you say, or how would you say it reflects an aspect of who you are?
I feel like what's interesting is that I started writing this book. I don't want to use the word obligation because I feel like that sounds a little bit more negative than I actually intended. But I started off writing it more as an expectation from others, where I'm an author, I'm a publisher, I publish all of these books, I know all of these things, that it was kind of like, all right, it's time that you write the book, you write the manifesto for everybody else to follow. And so I think in a lot of ways, it very much reflects who I am, because it really puts, I don't even know how many years, 8 years, or actually from an author standpoint, over a decade of my experiences that have created this process. So I feel like it's very tied to my identity, because it's not just a, hey, here's something good that you should do, here's a methodology to follow, here's this thing that's a good idea, but it's actually literally the exact process that I do for myself. And so I feel like there's some really kind of close connection to that, just because I do it for myself and I've taught it to others and I know it works. And so, because I think, sometimes people are writing books and they haven't actually tested out. It's like putting a recipe in a cookbook without actually testing the recipe if it's going to work. Like I think a lot of times that's how we as nonfiction authors are. We're like, hey, we think this will work, but we don't actually know. And so I feel like it's very tied to my identity, because it really is just kind of how I operate. And like I was saying before, I really wrote it with this kind of real time commentary of what I was thinking or what I was doing as I was writing that particular area.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so now to shift gears just a little bit, this podcast is for what I call high achieving women who've written nonfiction books and they want to make a difference. Just want to make a difference, and that's why they've done that. And high achieving to me means ambitious, professional, responsible in their professional lives and personal lives, doing all the things. People come to them, both personally and professionally, for whatever the thing is, whatever the support is. And so I asked myself, well, who supports them? And so I offer this podcast as a way to support these authors. Now, with that in mind, what's something from your experience, expertise, anywhere of life? What's one tip or piece of advice or anything that would support the person I just described?
It's having the right support system in place. It's not necessarily one person, but I find that it's a team of people that are managing some aspect of what you need to kind of keep you going. And so I think of, if I'm thinking of myself in terms of support systems, my family structures, if anyone wants to read the book, they'll see exactly why it's a little bit shaky. So for me, it's more of your chosen family rather than the family that you were born into. And so if I think about support systems and I think about, people who are high achieving, I feel like you have to have those cheerleaders by your side who are like, yeah, Robin, like you are crushing it right now. Like you are doing good in the world, and kind of gives you that motivation to kind of keep going. And I find that if I talk to people who are struggling, I find that a lot of times that common denominator is that they just don't have enough of those cheerleaders kind of by their side. And I also think on another side of this is that person that you can really talk to, like really be vulnerable with, really share what's going on for you. Because I think a lot of times we put women and people in general, yes, but women on this pedestal of you have to be everything and do everything, and you have to do it flawlessly. You can't show any cracks in the armor, and you have to be on your A game at all times. And if you have to be an amazing mother and an amazing boss and all of these things in between. And the reality is that we're all falling apart in some way at some point along the way. And so having the right people around us to be like, listen, I know you're having a rough moment, but remember all of these amazing accomplishments that you've done. Remember all of this amazing stuff that you've achieved before. Just remember that when you're having that moment where you feel like you're spiraling off the rails. So for me, I really think it's not just it's one support. I think it's a whole team of support. And for me, it comes down to having a really amazing partner who we have such shared beliefs and kind of values of like what we both want in life. And I want nothing more than to see her succeed and vice versa. And then having really amazing friends that also are doing incredible things too, to be able to say, yeah, you should do that crazy thing. Like I have a friend right now who's looking to buy some very, very large building for her business. And it is a huge leap. And I'm like, but you've got this, like you have all the things you need, like stop worrying about it. Like just go out and get it done. But like, I know that I'm that person for her, and I know she's that person for me. And so, I think it can kind of shape out and look different in a lot of ways, but I really think it just comes down to the people that you surround yourself with.
Yes, yes. And I love that, the way you two are supporting each other in that way. Follow those dreams. All right. So, I mean, we know that Publish Your Purpose is your book and it's your company. This podcast is Leadership Purpose. And so say more about this idea of having a sense of purpose. Do you think it's important to have a sense of purpose in your work? If so, why? If not, why not?
I feel like it should be a given what direction I'll go with this. What's interesting is that I don't know if you're familiar with anything around conscious capitalism, but there's an organization, there's a couple of books called Conscious Capitalism. There's an organization, they have local chapters. And I'm involved with a chapter here in Connecticut, and we're doing a leadership program right now. That's I think it's 8 or 12 months, and it's we're meeting, we're talking about employee relationships, we're talking about customer relationships, this, that, and the other. And we were talking about leadership yesterday in one of our workshops, and purpose's role in leadership. And it's interesting when you're around a table full of people who have similar beliefs and values, even if there's a lot of other fundamental things that on the surface would make it look like you don't have commonality. There's this kind of commonality that purpose can kind of bring forward. And we were having, a number of different kind of conversations. And my commentary was, I don't know how to function any different than I do, which is with purpose at the front and center at all times. Like there is no other way. And which is actually really interesting about the B Corp certification that I was mentioning before, because part of that is that you have to show a commitment, whether it be in time or whether it be in dollars, that you're volunteering time or you're fundraising or donating money toward charitable causes that are meaningful to you. And I was talking with a consultant who's helping me get recertified. And she was sharing a story with me saying she's got a client that's, like a multi-billion-dollar fortune company, and they can't come up with a 0.1% to show of any type of philanthropic or charitable anything. And when we were looking at my numbers, she's like, you're easily at 9%. And the metric is 2%. And she's like, so it's always funny to see these smaller companies that are just crushing it. And my response to her was, I don't know how to do it differently. Like it is in my blood to lead with purpose, to help other people find what their purpose is, and to just make sure that we're all just being the best versions of ourselves that we can be. And that might look different for you than it does for me, than it does for somebody listening to this. But at the end of the day, I think purpose is it's that North Star. It's the thing that helps us get out of bed in the morning when we're having a moment where we doubt ourselves, or, you have a client issue, or you're just having a rough patch in your life at the moment where you can say, all right, but, like for me, my purpose is very much to elevate and amplify those voices that are so unseen and unheard in books and in publishing. And so for me, if I'm having a moment where I'm like, why is this happening, or whatever the thing is, I'm like, but look how much you have. Like, look look what a privileged position you're in to be in a place where you can help other people share the spotlight, get on the stage, and impact huge communities of people. And so I think the more clear we are on what that purpose is, just the easier it makes us from a leadership standpoint, because every decision is made from that place of purpose, not as an afterthought. It's more of, I was talking with my hairstylist today. I was mentioning her before, where we were talking about employees and, being an employer versus employees. And I was saying, I'm like, I treat everyone how I would want to be treated. I do not think this is not rocket science. So if you have a problem with your child and you can't you can't fix that. Like, that is not something you can control. So why would I make it a big deal? And I wouldn't want that done to me. And I had an employer long ago that was not helpful when I was raising babies. So, I don't want to put that on somebody else. So to me, it's like, because purpose is there, right? Like there's that core purpose. So you don't even have to think about it. It kind of becomes part of your DNA.
Yes. And of course, I resonate with everything you said. Of course, as it's been the way throughout this conversation. All right. So you've been so generous with your time and your thoughts. But before we go and tell people how they can be in touch with you, is there something I haven't asked you that you want to share with our listeners today, or something that's just on your heart and mind? If not, it's okay.
I wish I had something, but I feel like this has been, because the whole podcast is around purpose. So I feel like you're asking all the things that I love to talk about.
Okay, good. I felt like we covered it all too, but I wanted to give you that opportunity.
I appreciate it.
I'm imagining people are wanting to find out how they can be in touch with you. How can they connect with you?
So it is fairly easy. Going to publishyourpurpose.com is where I am at. I'm also at jenntgrace.com. But yeah, everything's there. I'm on Jenn T Grace on all the socials, Publish Your Purpose on all the socials. So I'm available, and information about the book, if depending on when you're listening to this, it's starting to trickle out. So it'll be there at some point.
Okay, fantastic. Jenn, thank you so much for spending your time here and your wisdom and insights and all the things from your life. I really appreciate you and the clarity of your thoughts that you bring to the conversation. Again, thank you for being here, Jenn T Grace.
Thank you for having me. I love your show, so I'm happy to be on it.
I'm glad. Okay, everyone. And if you want to hear more about me, you can find me at my website, robinlowens.com, robinlowens.com. Or you can find me on the socials, Robin L. Owens, PhD, Robin L. Owens, PhD. And if you happen to be an author who has written a book and you've been thinking about creating a course based on that book and you just didn't know where to start or how to begin, head on over to my website and get my free training on how to do that. And the website is createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com. And you'll find the free training there. And in the meantime, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.